Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition. We're going to discuss if it fits your macros, so IIFYM diets, and body weight tracking. And we're going to be discussing kind of the unseen effects. So IIFYM, which no one really says it that way, they just call it if it fits your macros. What that refers to is a diet style where you have calories that you would track every day, and typically they're going to also give you the macronutrient breakdown, which is what macros kind of stands for. So they're going to tell you how much protein you should have, how much carbs, and how much fats. So it's kind of a diet where that's what you track. And so you're tracking calorie intake, protein intake, carb intake, fat intake, and then you're going to track kind of the effects of that diet on a body weight measurement. So basically, usually a weight scale. So that type of diet has a lot of benefits to it. So kind of the nerdy stuff that I would look at first is if we remember, we've talked a lot about what are kind of the biggest components that you need to address in diets. So in podcast number 41, titled Diet Right, What Matters Most, that's the one that kind of discusses kind of the top four components of a diet and what's most important, what's the most kind of bang for your buck. So we know calories, overall caloric intake is most important. So even if I eat healthy food, but I eat too much of it, I will gain body fat, and it'll prevent me from losing body fat. So then even if I eat absolute crap, but I eat less calories than what I use per day, my body will have to make up the calorie deficit by burning down body fat. Now there are some, long-term kind of effects and asterisk to everything I said there, but that's the general truth. Is even if I eat healthy stuff but I eat too much, it's not good. Even if I eat unhealthy stuff, that doesn't automatically make it ineffective as a diet. If I eat unhealthy stuff but I eat very little of it, I'll still lose body fat. So overall calories determines whether we gain or lose weight. Protein intake is number 2. So that's the second most important thing. And the reason why that's important is for many reasons, but protein is kind of the maintenance and repair of our body. And if you don't have enough protein, your body is going to be kind of wear and tear. It's going to always feel a little bit like crap. You're going to have a high degree of water retention. You're just not going to run really well. So it's kind of like we've said before, it's like having a car, but you never get your car serviced. You just put gasoline in it every time the tank runs empty, and then you just keep running it and running it and running it. That works for a little while, but then eventually the car dies. So, something goes wrong with the oil, like you don't have enough oil in the car. Something goes wrong with something in the mechanics or the engine. It's just if you never get it looked at, you never get it serviced or repaired, it's not going to run as far and as long as high of quality as what you'd want. So protein is kind of like the repair and the maintenance of the body. So we can put in all the carbs and fats we want, but if we never put in enough protein, the body and the system kind of runs down. So those are the two most important things, is caloric intake and then protein intake. And if it fits your macros, covers those first two. So by giving you the calorie amount, obviously it's covering calories. By telling you how much protein you should have per day, obviously it's covering how much protein you should have per day. Now, if the recommendations they're giving you are incorrect, well then you're not going to get good results. But so we're assuming that they're giving you good caloric recommendations and good protein recommendations. So we have our own podcast to tell you how to do that. Podcast number 153 titles How Many Calories Do You Need? And podcast 33, way back when, podcast 33, we cover how much protein do you need. So we'll kind of give you those so you can look at that and find your, compare the recommendations maybe you've been given to what we think are kind of true and correct. So if it fits your macros, it does cover the two most important things of dieting. But, hence the title where we say about the unseen effects, is if it fits your macros, the general basic form of that dieting style, okay, without anything specially added to it, does not address the number 3 and number 4 kind of most important components. Number 3 being meal timing, and number 4 being macronutrient quality. So out of the protein sources available, are you eating quote unquote good ones or quote unquote bad ones. Same thing for carbs. You're eating healthy carbs, you're eating a lot of sugars. Same thing for fats. Are you eating healthy fats or a lot of like fried food and like bad stuff, quote unquote. So since If It Fits Your Macros doesn't cover meal timing and it doesn't cover macronutrient quality in its like most basic form of diet, okay? So you might be running some type of If It Fits Your Macros that has a meal timing component to it. That means it's been altered to address number 3. Or you might have an If It Fits Your Macros that has kind of like an approved foods list. And that means they're trying to control number 4, macronutrient quality. So sometimes the creator of a If It Fits Your Macros diet will add additional rules above the basic format. And if they do, that's great. That's actually a good thing. That's what we would want you to do, is to address more of the components as possible. So, but a general If It Fits Your Macros diet only covers the first 2. And by not covering number 3 and number 4, there are unseen effects that you do not see related to actually what you would consider the results of the diet. So most people, when they're judging a diet's results, whether it's a diet to gain weight or a diet to lose weight, it's going to be weight change. That's what they're actually kind of judging the results by. So we tend to look at kind of the end product of a diet, not necessarily the process in which we got the result. And that's where number 3 and number 4 come into play, is they can actually, if you address them, they can improve the process, the quality of the experience of the diet. So when we look at a scale, if we're measuring weight change, we are measuring just the total amount of fat and muscle we have. Now, obviously, bone, water retention, and hair, nails, whatever the heck else is in you. But that's essentially the 2 kind of main things that we would look for aesthetics, is fat and muscle. So a scale just measures the total amount of fat and muscle you have in your body. It does not measure how much fat you have compared to muscle. Okay? So the term body composition refers to the kind of comparison. How much fat versus muscle. That's body composition. Body weight is how much fat and muscle. So there's no like differential between the 2. So it's important for us to consider that, is when we're looking at weight change on a scale, well, how do we know what we're losing? Is what we're losing fat and we're keeping all of our muscle? So what about if we're gaining weight? Is what we're gaining only muscle but no fat? Those are the scenarios we would love to be true, but they're 100% not true, by the way, not even close. And if you're not paying attention to number 3 and number 4, okay, meal timing and macronutrient quality, you're going to be getting less of those results that you'd want. So when you lose weight, you'll lose more muscle than what you would like if you don't address number 3 and number 4. If you're gaining weight, you will gain more fat than what you want if you don't address number 3 and number 4. So there are effects to body composition when you don't properly address meal timing and macronutrient quality. Then there's other effects. There's effects we have on cravings. There's effects on daily energy throughout the day, because I just call it daily energy. And then there's even digestive stress, digestive issues if we don't address meal timing and macronutrient quality. And there's some other odds and ends. But the big 4 that we're going to discuss in this podcast are the effects on body composition, cravings, energy throughout the day, and digestive stress. So the intent of what I want to talk about today is to open your eyes to the fact that basic If It Fits Your Macro diets are effective via scale, but they don't necessarily make it the best process for you. So often when people do If It Fits Your Macro diets, they tend to only do them temporarily because the process isn't very enjoyable. Since the process doesn't become something that they feel like they can do with, decent level of ease for the rest of their life. So it doesn't become a lifestyle of eating. It's just, let me do whatever I got to do to make these numbers every day. But they don't actually learn how to eat well and learn how to eat correctly. They don't learn how to make long-term, lifelong changes. So often when people use If It Fits Your Macro diets, they'll get the result they want for the dieting period, but then they're going to revert back to their old bad habits. They're going to gain back weight that they lost, or they're going to lose good quality weight that they had gained if they were trying to gain weight. But the effects of their diet, the results of the diet, don't stay. They're not permanent because the habits of the diet aren't permanent. So the intent here is to let you know that if you don't address 3 and 4, you don't get the best quality of process, and therefore you're unlikely to kind of stick with it long term. So we're going to talk about the effects and then kind of give you some eye-opening on that, and then give you some ways to maybe correct it. Cool. So the first thing we're going to look at is body composition, kind of the effects of when you don't address meal timing and macronutrient quality. So body composition, again, is how much muscle compared to how much body fat I have. So when somebody doesn't address meal timing, typically with If It Fits Your Macro diets, the person will still just eat whenever the hell it's most convenient for them. And for most people, this is going to mean they're going to skimp out on breakfast. They're going to eat some shitty lunch at like a fast food restaurant or just a restaurant out with work or something like that. They're going to not eat anything in the afternoon, eat an okay but probably overblown dinner, and then snack a whole bunch before they go to bed. So typically what ends up happening is the opposing times of when we're active is when they eat. So when they're most active, they eat less. When they're least active, they eat most. And what ends up happening is sure, you may match your caloric usage per day. So maybe you use 2,000 calories a day, and you're eating, say, 1,800 or 1,700 to try to promote fat loss. The problem is, what is body fat? Body fat is stored energy. Our body stores energy for when it thinks it may need it in the future, when the energy that we eat is insufficient for the energy that we use. That's why we have body fat. So it's like, why do we have money in our bank account? For when our income doesn't match our expenses. I about said outcome. But when our income doesn't match our expenses. So just in case, say you lose your job, you want to have some money saved up. Well, that's what body fat is. In case you miss a meal, the body wants to have energy saved up. That's what body fat is. Well, what happens if your car breaks down? So your car breaks down, you have to buy a new car. You have to have money in reserve to pay for that new car. Well, what happens if you're not eating sufficient calories for your energy output? So all of a sudden you have to be super active or go work out, and you're on an empty stomach. Where do you think the body's finding the fuel for that? It's in stored body fat. So what ends up happening is when you do not consume calories at the same time you use them, the body then experiences moments where you're needing calories when it isn't supplied. So it has to provide its own supply, which is body fat. So when our meal timing is off, okay, it promotes our body to try to retain as much body fat as possible. So when we reduce calories for a fat loss diet, and we tell our body is, hey, I'm going to give you less calories than what you need, so hopefully you'll burn body fat. Well, if you don't eat correctly at meal timing, then what happens is your body's going to say, well, I can't give up all this body fat because you make me run sometimes when I have no energy. So you're asking me to run in a deficit, and I can't do that. The body can't run with negative energy. That doesn't make sense. I can't buy a new car if I have no money. There's no credit cards for the body. Okay? So there's no loans for the body. So what the body tries to do is it tries to compensate in a way that we would kind of compensate financially, like through credit cards and loans, is it tries to figure out, okay, well, where can I conserve my energy usage? So if you're going to give me 300 calories less than what I need, how can I need 300 calories less? How can I just lower my need? One of the ways it lowers its need is getting rid of muscle tissue that it doesn't feel like it uses. So muscle tissue requires energy from our body to stay alive. So if we're not using that muscle tissue, we're not challenging our body every day to use that muscle, it's going to question whether that muscle is useful or not. And if it deems that it isn't useful, it'll get rid of it. So, if I start a diet and I have a general level of activity and I restrict my calories and I maintain that same level of activity, our body will downgrade its muscle tissue to the least amount needed to maintain our current activity level. And usually there is room, okay, for the body to strip some of that off. So it's going to decrease muscle mass on your body. That will decrease your body weight. So you will see the number on the scale go down. We naively assume that that's fat loss whenever it's actual muscle loss. So almost at all times when we're dieting, we're losing some percentage of fat and some percentage of muscle. If you do correct meal timing and you do resistance training that forces the body to require the muscle mass that we have on our body, it deems it as necessary. It'll lose the least amount of muscle tissue during a dieting phase and lose the most amount of fat possible. So the best way to maximize our body composition is to maximize our meal timing. We want to decrease the need for the body to reserve energy. If I'm always giving it energy when it needs it, it doesn't need body fat. So it'll be more likely to get rid of body fat than trying to reduce its caloric usage by getting rid of muscle mass. So that's one of the things we want to consider. So if I get meal timing incorrect, my body weight will still go down because I'm stripping muscle tissue off at a higher rate than I should if I were to match my meal timing. So that's something to consider. Then if we do macronutrient quality, so if I'm just kind of eating junky stuff, my body isn't going to be able to be its most best. That's a weird way of saying that. So I probably need to script some of these things. But that way I don't say phrases like most best. But anyhow, so if I don't eat a really good quality of food, how does that really affect body composition? It's going to affect it more in regards to just a side effect of looks, in the sense of like higher degrees of water retention. So if I have, my protein accounted for, our protein helps to regulate water retention. Now, my net macronutrient quality would refer to, okay, if I have a carb intake amount per day, say I'm supposed to eat 100 carbs per day, and I eat them from sugars versus healthy complex carbs, that sugar is going to cause a higher degree of water retention in my body, because my body is going to burn up the sugar and then be left with nothing. And when our body's left with nothing, energy-wise, one of the side effects is kind of like we just get kind of like, it's hard to kind of give you guys the exact science behind all this stuff because it has a long explanation, but I'm going to give you the short version. And if you like the longer one, always email me if you want more details. But in general, when we eat carbohydrates and we have some sodium in our diet and we have water, our body will store water in our muscle cells in the form of glycogen. Whenever we're eating very fast digesting carbohydrates, sugary carbs, our body burns through that so fast it can't form glycogen very well. So therefore the water that would have been held in our muscle is now released under our skin. So it gives us water retention in the form of like that kind of poofy spare tire around our waist. That little bit of fat over our love handles. So on those days where you just kind of feel like kind of bloated and blah and just kind of like a mushy marshmallow, that's kind of the effect, is we lose water in our muscles and it gets dumped under our skin. So that doesn't make us look our best. So that's what it has to do with like an effects of body composition, is I might do a diet where I lose all the weight I'd want to lose. So I see the scale change, but I still feel soft and pudgy. That can be an effect of eating bad quote-unquote carbs versus good quote-unquote carbs. So eating more sugary type foods rather than eating complex carbohydrates. So that's one of the effects. So a simple correction to this is, for meal timing, go listen to podcast number 249 that discusses meal timing. You need to eat more when you move more, eat less when you move less. Okay? Now, macronutrient quality. We have some podcasts for that as well. Okay. But in general, it comes down to eating just healthy whole foods rather than quick, shitty kind of blah foods. So rather than eating, Pop Tarts, that's the common phrase, by the way, when somebody makes fun of if it fits your macro diets. So rather than eating Pop Tarts, I'd eat sweet potatoes. So our protein podcast, okay, for types of protein like macronutrient information. So we said 33 tells you how much protein you should have. Podcast number 33. Podcast 216 tells you what type of proteins are best. Okay. Podcast 21 tells you about carbohydrates, which ones are best. And podcast 29 tells you about fats, which ones are best. So you can go through and listen to those. But it comes down to common sense. Just eat healthy foods compared to junky, crappy foods. Okay? Now, cravings. If I don't pay attention to meal timing, again, meaning that I'm trying to run my body when I don't have proper fueling for it. So I'm trying to move around and do a lot of effort, but I didn't really fuel my body well. Our body's going to say, holy crap, you're running me in a deficit. I really need food. Let's send the signal to the brain that says, feed me. So all of a sudden your body says, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, and that's cravings. So when you're running your body in an energy deficit, meaning you're moving around more and eating less, which is not what we want. So when we move more, we want to eat more. So we want our energy, when it goes up, our food should go up. But if my energy is going up and my food is down, our body's going to feel that deficit and it's going to say, hey, I need help, go eat food. And then we're going to say, no, I don't want to eat food because I need to burn body fat. And it's saying, well, this is too big of a deficit. I need you to go eat food. And then you're going to deal with that argument all day, and that's the sensation of cravings. Okay? So if your meal timing isn't correct, you will have a higher degree of cravings. If your macronutrient quality isn't correct, so if you have a diet that has lots of sugars in it, your body is going to be well aware of how good and easy sugar feels. So sugar, by the way, is the most closest to what we break food down to in our body. So in general, there's a lot of details, but in general, we break the food we eat down into glucose. So, oh my gosh, there's so many holes in this, so just go with me on this with the idea of it, okay? So, but one of the things we break our food down into is glucose, and sugar is already kind of in its broken down form. So when we eat sugar, our body doesn't have to try really hard. It just goes, oh great, you gave me what I needed, I'll use it now. Whereas when we eat something that's more complex, like say you eat a piece of steak, your body has to tear that down, break it apart, and find the molecules, kind of create the broken down individual molecules that it needs. So when we eat something that's complex, like say a sweet potato, our body has to work to turn that into glucose, which is in our benefit, by the way. When you eat something that's sugary, the body doesn't have to do a lot of work. So if you give it easy calories, meaning you eat sugar often, it's going to know that and it's going to keep asking you for easy calories. So if it thinks easy is an option, it's going to ask for easy. If your diet is not high in sugars, so you have a better macronutrient profile, your body's going to recognize, shit, everything this person eats makes me do work. I guess that's just the way it is. So the cravings will reduce. So if it thinks easy is an option, it'll ask for it. If it doesn't think easy is an option, it won't ask for it. So your cravings, your sensation of cravings will go down. They might not, completely non-exist. They're still going to probably be there to some degree. But they will go down and de-intensify. So if you're having trouble with cravings, you need to pay better attention to meal timing and macronutrient quality. That'll reduce the cravings for you. Okay? Next thing we have is inconsistent energy throughout the day. So again, if our meal timing is off and we're moving around a lot and we're not eating food, along with the sensation of the body telling you to eat more, so giving you cravings, it's also going to say stop moving around. So you're going to have this sensation of the body going, dude or dudette, you're asking me to do stuff right now and I am not fueled for this. So either give me fuel or stop doing this shit. And that's what we have to decide. So that energy drop where we're kind of like feel drained, we don't feel like doing anything, is the body saying, let me freaking catch up. I need to catch up. Stop moving around. So when we feel energy lulls throughout the day, it's often related to us being dehydrated and underfed. And too severely of an underfed that it's actually impairing quality of life. So we do need some caloric reduction if we're trying to lose body fat. But we want a caloric reduction that still matches our activity level throughout the day. And we want a caloric reduction while still eating very healthy, complex foods. So that way the reduction is there, but it's not shutting down our normal standard of life. So again, if you don't pay attention to meal timing and you don't pay attention to macronutrient quality, your daily energy will not be good. And the reason why macronutrient quality is important for daily energy is certain foods last for certain lengths of times in terms of energy. So a sweet potato might give us 3 to 4 hours of energy as it breaks down because it's a slow breaking down food. Whereas if I eat the same number of carbs, but I eat them in sugars, my body gets all the energy right away and it burns it all up. We're super excited, we're manic and active, then boom, we got nothing. So all that fades away, it burns out. So that's when our energy crashes. So if you have big spikes and drops in energy per day, you're probably not eating the best quality of macronutrients. So that's why meal timing and macronutrient quality is important. The last thing we're going to look at here is digestive stress. So meal timing, most people are going to do better with digesting smaller amounts throughout the day. Now, there are certain people who I work with that have digestive disorders, and they're better off eating one meal per day because they have something wrong with their digestive system. And if they only annoy it once per day, it helps with their problem. But most people, if they're healthy, if they don't have anxiety, if they don't have high stress, they're relatively healthy, they're going to do better with smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day. That the intake of the meal matches their energy output. So they're going to do better in terms of not causing digestive stress where they eat a meal, they feel bloated and heavy and feel like taking a nap. That can also do with the types of foods you eat, but also the amount. If I eat a huge meal, like a 1,000 plus calorie meal, my body is going to be so busy processing that it doesn't want to do anything else. So it's going to say, okay, hey, don't do anything for a little bit. Let me take care of this. So I'm going to make you super sleepy. I'm going to make you feel like you have no energy and not want to do anything. So if you eat a meal and all of a sudden feel lethargic, that meal might be too big for you. So you need to spread those calories out. So that's where meal timing helps. We also have a podcast on meal frequency, okay, which tells you how often you should eat throughout the day, which is podcast number 329. Now, macronutrient quality, why that's important for digestive stress is if you're eating very fast digesting foods, that causes a lot of instant action on your body, okay? And it has to go, oh crap, I have to do this now. So that's one issue. And then also, if you're eating a really weird, crazy variety of foods, your body, the gut bacteria, so the bacteria you have in your gut, that in your intestines that helps you break down food. We have bacteria specific to the types of foods that we eat that help us break it down the most efficiently with the least amount of kind of gas production and bloatedness and uncomfortableness. Well, if you're always eating a bunch of weird foods, the body can't really predict which type of bacteria it needs. If you eat more consistent foods, it can do a more consistent, easy job of breaking them down. So, that's some good information. So, if it fits your macro diets, the ones that are purely just calories and macronutrient based, they are effective when you look at the change of a weight on a weight scale, okay? But they are not the best for maximizing body composition, maximizing craving control, maximizing daily energy, and maximizing digestive ease. So that's very important, very helpful to know, okay? So you can use it if it fits your macros, but add in some rules that address number 3 and number 4, okay, that address meal timing in your macronutrient qualities. So how you can do that is listen to those podcasts and learn what the best choices are for those options. Cool. Just thought this would be fun to know. So it's fun to see that even though a diet works, quote unquote, on a scale, doesn't mean it's actually the best diet, because you might not feel the best while you're dieting. Therefore, you're not likely to stick with those life changes long term, actually making them life changes. They're just going to be temporary. You get the results you wanted on a scale, but you go back to your old habits and all the weight comes right back. Okay? So, little food for thought, and hopefully that helped open your eyes to some things that maybe you can help address in your life to get you better quality of experience along with the results. Cool. So if you like this type of podcast, if you like this type of information, and you know any family or friends that might need to know this, feel free to share it, okay? So the more we share the podcast, the more people we can help. So thank you if you do share it. Also, if you like this type of information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. So this podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us at our email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.